Welcome back to Face the Nation. We're going to switch gears now, and in honor of Easter and Passover, we want to talk about faith with those who celebrate those holidays and write, think, and participate in the religious life of America. Rod Dreher is a writer for the American Conservative, and his new book is titled The Benedict Option. Russell Moore is the president of the Southern Baptist Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, and Abigail Pogrebin is also a writer. Her latest book is My Jewish Year, 18 Holidays, One Wandering Jew. And Father James Martin joins us from New York. Father Martin is a Jesuit priest and editor-at-large at America Magazine. Father, I want to start with you. The Jesuits believe that God can be found in all things. What does that mean in the practical life of a Catholic?
Well, it means that God is not just confined, or the experience of God is not just confined to the walls of a church or reading the Bible. God can be experienced in all moments of our lives, in relationships, in work, in our family, in friends, in nature. So it's an invitation to really meet God in all things, in all people, and in all events.
Abby, you wrote that you said you were Jewish in the way that the Olive Garden was Italian, that you had a hunger that led you to write your book. Tell me about that hunger.
I was one of those, they sometimes call us cafeteria-style Jews. I picked and chose, and part of it was because I didn't have a real basis in Jewish education, and I was missing it. I was missing the infrastructure, the architecture of a Jewish year, and that's why I took a deep dive, spending an entire year observing every Jewish holiday in the calendar, and as you may have had a sense of it, there are quite a few.
Russell, you are in the middle of the political conversation in Washington, constantly being pulled into the political. But where does faith for you sit outside of the political when you think of your faith?
Well, most of it is outside of the political. And so I'm the kind of person, some people come to faith after years of substance abuse and all sorts of problems. I had the opposite situation. I was a good kid growing up in the Bible Belt, thinking that somehow I could achieve something for God in a way that would make God accept me and receive me. And the gospel that came to me in my teenage years told me you don't have to perform. Put your faith in Jesus Christ, and the good news is that God receives you by grace. Just receive that and trust that. That's what's upended my life.
And Rod, you've written a lot about this, not just your current book, but your faith you've written about in your other books. Where does it sit for you in your life?
Well, faith is everything. It is my life. I think that in America we tend to have a terrible tendency to separate church from life, to compartmentalize it, to keep it on Sunday morning and maybe holy days. But as an Orthodox Christian, I've been Eastern Orthodox for 11 years now, I've come to see that Christianity is a total way of life. It's a way of life with an institution attached to it. For me and my family, life is the liturgy, life is the holy days, life is prayer, life is fasting, and life is joy. I have been so filled with joy in just worshiping as an Orthodox Christian. I think that is the secret to the Orthodox life, is the joy of Christ.
Father, you have written about that joy in your book about comedy and laughter in the religious life. But let me ask you about Easter. For some people, Easter is about eggs and getting as much candy as you can get. What is Easter really about, though?
Well, Mr. Dreher is right. It's about joy. The message of Easter, the basic message is that Christ is risen, which changes everything. Underlying that is the message that life is stronger than death, that hope is stronger than despair, and that love is stronger than hate. So Easter is the center of the Christian message, and it is a joyful message. It is the good news, after all. So it's a lot more than about eggs and marshmallow peeps.
Abby, you write about Passover, of course, the message of Passover obviously being the Jews no longer being enslaved. But I was interested in that idea as it carries to the current moment, but also the other holidays you write about. What's the role those play in the Jewish year and in the Jewish faith?
I would say, taking this immersive dive, which really has changed my life and my perspective, frankly, on every day. I interviewed over 62 rabbis, and if anything came through from their message for every holiday, and Passover in particular, it's that you look at our history and what the message of memory is. And over again, it is to look at the stranger, to say we have been the stranger, we have been the oppressed, and that means we cannot become the oppressor. We need to look at the person who is struggling, not just next door, but the person we don't know or have never met, And that comes through absolutely in Passover. It's a universal message of redemption, of being taken out from bondage into freedom, but also who around us is in bondage right now. And for some people, that is on a very global level. For some, it's a very internal bondage. Some people feel very personally that they are stuck or enslaved.
The Exodus story is a very powerful one, and it also embodies the Christian search to be released from the bondage of sin and be brought to the promised land of life in Christ. And I think that's one thing that gets lost in a lot of American Christianity. It tends to be very, very comfortable, very therapeutic. Mm-hmm. In fact, if we're to know resurrection, we have to first die to ourselves, and that can mean things that are very uncomfortable to us, like, as you say, welcoming the stranger.
Some people fear death in a way in which they want to identify themselves with their careers. Some people fear death and they experience that as despair and a lack of meaning. As an evangelical Christian, I believe God has answered that on Easter Sunday with the raising of Jesus from the dead, which for me is not a mere metaphor. We really believe that this previously dead body has come back to life, which is good news, the most significant act in the universe.
We're going to take a pause right there, and after this short break, we'll be right back with more from our panel. And we're back with more from our panel on this holiday Sunday. Father Martin, I want to ask you about politics and religion here. You are now a consultor to the Vatican's Secretary for Communications. One of the things I hear from American Catholics is they love Pope Francis's message, and then some of them say, though, but I wish he wouldn't talk about politics, which for them means what he said about global warming. How should people understand what the Pope's role is in political life? Should he stay out of it?
Well, the Pope isn't really talking politics when he's talking about global warming. He's talking about caring for the environment, caring for God's creation. And so his encyclical is really a kind of a compendium of Catholic teaching on the environment and on economic matters as well. As well, when he talks about welcoming the stranger, which was adverted to earlier, welcoming the migrant, the refugee, he's simply preaching the gospel. So if what he says and if the proclamation of the gospel has political overtones, so be it. But he's not setting out to be an overtly political person.
Russell, President Donald Trump has been elected with 81% support of evangelical Christians. Is that a good or bad thing for religion and public life?
Well, I think we'll see what the next few years will mean for religion in American life. But I think most evangelicals right now, wherever they stood on the election, have the understanding that the Bible commands us to pray for our leaders, to wish the best for our leaders, to wish the best for our country. And so I think most evangelical Christians are willing to pray for President Trump, for his administration, and also to seek to be good citizens.
Rod, in the years that I've covered politics, there are a lot of people who have invested very heavily, people of faith who have invested heavily in the political process, and it ends up disappointing them because of the natural compromises that are a part of politics, and then sometimes the natural switchbacks against belief, whereas belief is all about maintaining a set of principles come what may. How do you see that and the connection between religion and politics in American life?
Well, I think Father Martin is correct that the gospel does have certain political implications. If by political you mean having to do with the life that we live together, the common good. But I think that people like me, conservative Christians, have made an enormous mistake over the past 30 years in placing too many eggs in the political basket. We've tended to think that if we just elect the right Republican and get the right Republicans into Congress, everything's going to take care of itself. Well, that didn't happen, and in the meantime, we lost the culture. So what I call for in the Benedict option is Christians to step back from politics, not get away from it entirely, but just reprioritize things and start placing more of your emphasis on the local, on building up your local community, because that's politics too.
Abby, the question of Israel and protecting Israel is a very important issue for Jewish Americans. It's become a central part of our politics. And how do you see that issue? Because in the conversations I've had with American Jews, the question of Israel can get so hot so fast.
It's very true, and I would say that if there's anything in the Jewish community that we haven't quite figured out, it's how to talk to each other about our disagreements about Israel. But I would say what we have in common is that it is not just a place that is precious, but a place that we all believe in. And it's that some people say, I love America, but I don't necessarily love the government's decisions, every decision or policy that the government decides. I think similarly, we all love Israel, and we don't always agree without how Israel is necessarily conducting itself in any given moment. But generally, we are a tiny people, and we kind of, I don't think, can afford to be as divided about something that we all care so dearly about. Because it's something that if you, I think, ask every Jew, they would say is fundamental to our identity.
Father Martin, do you see a threat to religious life coming from politics?
You know, often politicians can force religious leaders or religious people to take sides politically, but the church really needs to transcend that. Because if we align ourselves too much with one party, we are disappointed, and also we need to keep our independence. So there can be a threat in terms of trying to sort of box religious people in, and I think religious people need to be free of a kind of over-identification with one party or another, or one politician or another.
Is that, Russell, do you see that where various evangelicals I've talked to have said, you know, the idea that basically if you're not a Republican, you can't be an evangelical. Is that unfair, that criticism, or do you?
Well, I think it's even broader than that. I think we live in an American society where we become politically defined as our first identity across the board, no matter what religion we are, or if we have, or no religion. I think that's part of the problem. And I think sometimes when secular Americans look at evangelical Christians, they see us simply in political terms. So I think evangelicals are like cicadas. We go underground until the Iowa caucuses every 4 years, and that's when people pay attention to what evangelical Christians are doing. When in reality, most of our lives has nothing to do with politics. Most of our lives is about building up through the teaching of the gospel the kind of communities that are then going to be able to live out their lives in various ways. And so one of the primary messages we have is to say politics is an important discussion, but it's not an ultimate discussion. And so anyone, no matter where they are on the spectrum from right to left, who puts ultimate hope there is going to be ultimately disappointed.
Rod, let me ask you about the secular protections of various faiths. Are those working against or a part of the genius of the American system?
I think it was Adams who said that our Constitution is made for moral and religious people, but it's insufficient to govern any other. Back when we had a more general civil religion based in the Judeo-Christian tradition, I think it was easier for us to solve our problems because we had a common base of authority there and a common framework for discussion. That's gone. That's what I mean by post-Christian, John. Not that there are no Christians, but that we've lost that basis. So I think that as we see the greater secularization of America, we are also seeing the state coming down harder and harder on religious liberty, especially around LGBT issues. That is where the next fight is for religious liberty, around the right of Christian institutions and other religious institutions to govern themselves according to their faith. I think that a lot of people voted for Trump with a heavy heart, a lot of Christians thinking that at least Trump would not be as aggressive going after religious institutions as the Democrats were. And I think maybe we'll be happy with that. I hope so. But Trump is not going to be the ultimate savior of Christianity in America.
What's your view of the secular protections that a lot of people feel allows them to worship in America are seen by other Americans as the thing that's encroaching upon religion in American life?
I think it's a very dangerous sort of conversation that we're having right now, where there's a push to marginalize religious institutions to the point that they can't be religious anymore. I think that's dangerous, and I think that's not just dangerous for religious people, that's dangerous for secular, non-religious people. We need to be the kind of society that protects conscience, that protects the right of people to live out the deepest convictions that they have. And so the idea that if we don't like speech, we shut it down, and if we don't like religions, we shut them out, is not one that we should pursue in American life.
You know, it makes me think just that we're sitting here at this table basically all agreeing, and we share actually many of the same principles and texts. And in some sense, we should get back to what our traditions actually tell us about how to live our lives. There are blueprints that are thousands of years old that, in a sense, we have abandoned for the political realm. And it's not a Pollyannish utopian view of we're all going to agree, but I do think we've gotten too far away from what our texts are actually teaching us. And perhaps to the Father's point, where the Pope was not talking politically, if we read it much more about what are our traditions demanding of us, maybe we would have less divisions and actually be more unified.
Final word to you, Father, on this question of the secular protections in America and their tension with the religious life.
Well, I would say certainly, religious people need to be protected, but I would also say that we need to make sure that the people who have been marginalized in the past, LGBT people, minorities, and even atheists and agnostics, feel included in our vision. Jesus Christ's vision was one of inclusion. He was always drawing people in from the outsides. And so I think as long as we don't exclude or marginalize people even further in this conversation, I think we'll be doing okay.
All right, I want to thank our panel, all of you for being here, and we'll be back in a moment.